Surely you, the sole presiding deity of the universe, should not tolerate the followers of Maheshvara behaving like the ordinary people of the world. And this stanza is a recognition that Shaiva Upasaka, or followers, are not normal and have no interest in what was understood in those days to be normality. And he's saying, why should the ultimate source of the universe, accept normalcy from the profoundly transcendent, not normal cause, or not, there is no cause, source, is not compatible with what society defines as normal. That's what he's really trying to say there. And one of the reasons he's saying that is because none of us, even the person who is striving desperately to be normal, none of us are normal, and none of us should struggle in the attempt to be that. But rather, we should be wholly positive in our focus on growing our understanding and our alignment in our deepest inner resource, which will transform our appearance into a manifestation that is beyond normal. And that transcendent of normal is the expression of an unimaginable possibility. Hallelujah. Because normal is so boring, we could choke to death on it. And I remember being a teenager and thinking boring was absolutely killing me, living in that tiny town. I mean, the most exciting thing that happened in the summertime is you went out and listened to the corn grow, right? I mean, when we finally got our driver's licenses, we got off our bicycles, got our driver's license, we'd drive out and listen to the corn grow. I'm not joking. But I just remember boring, in those days, boring was death to me. And I learned in those days that if I was going to have anything interesting at all happen in my life, I had to make it myself, because the most exciting thing the world was going to provide me was corn popping at night as it grows. I can still remember, and really I can, the smell and the sound of corn just desperately exploding in growth in the summertime. Pop, 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 pop. So what the author is saying here is that the devotees, those people who are committed to truly realizing their own deepest nature, their own source, are people who cannot expect to be normal or to be considered normal, and should not waste their precious time and resource bothering with the topic. Maheshvara should not tolerate his followers behaving like ordinary people of the world. Those who, through never-ending affection, have become the followers of your feet derive the deepest pleasure from anything they do. Because in alignment with the ultimate reality, all activity is, and certainly in a non-normal environment of uncertainty, every action is creative. That's the wonderful thing about everything creative. And it's like, I always think about Laura when I talk about creativity, because when the word comes up, I mean, hers is not the only form, but every time she starts to be creative, she's looking at a blank canvas. And, you know, I think about looking at a blank canvas, and it's completely intimidating. Don looks at a bucket of sand every time he wants to get creative. James is looking at a bunch of hard-packed clay, you know, covered over by crabgrass. If he's lucky, it's Johnson's grass. But rooted in that deepest creative resource that is our own, it's rising up and its unfolding is in every circumstance a completely blissful occasion. Whether it is successful in worldly terms or not is irrelevant, because whatever is successful is fine, and whatever is not successful is a learning experience that brings us, in fact, more growth than the former. So his followers, Maheshwara's devotees, derive the deepest pleasure from anything they do. Were you the great, and Maheshwara is considered to be the great destroyer in the ordinary sphere of Indian cultural and religious belief. Shiva is the great destroyer. And so he mentions that here. Where you, the great destroyer, are protector, how can there be any disease? Wherever your Lakshmi resides, what other desire for their enjoyment can there be? This is a whole interesting question, because this sutra begs the question about, when he mentions disease, what is health? What is health? And it's amazing to me, because this is an interesting topic to me, of course, because I've dealt with it my whole life. What is health? This is a question that our allopathic medical system has never even considered. And that's shocking to me. And that's because the goal of our allopathic medical system is not health. The goal is the suppression of symptoms. Even though those people are in fact smart enough to recognize that the suppression of symptoms drives them deeper into the system, and each suppression creates more problems for the patient than it solves. And so when we started the ashram, I was completely sympathetic to people who were having stress. And, you know, I understood that the healthcare system had nothing to offer them that could actually help. And so but my own personal experience was yoga and meditation was powerful, the most powerful. That's still my attitude. So I have existed for my history concerning myself with the manifestation of the deepest inner resource in a human being, within a human being on the physical level. And what we call the expression of the deepest resource in a human being on a physical level is health. That's what we call it. This body is extraordinary in its capacity to heal itself. And the healing that happens from the emergence of that resource through our practice of contact, alignment, and flow. And we have lots of tools. We've developed tools. I was profoundly blessed to meet Dr. Becker, one of the founders of cranial osteopathy, and learn from him. I mean, most of you know he was my friend from 1973 till he died in 96. And that I had a long and wonderful relationship with him. And we all benefited from that. We also have wonderful Chinese medicine physicians, traditional physicians, wonderful chiropractors in our community. We've had wonderful and homeopathy is something that we have developed. And we've done this specifically because we acknowledge that many of the people who've come to us over the years needed healing before they could practice. And everybody needs healing, and it's a very good thing. Bravo to healing. So that he brings this up now, that Shiva, which is the ocean of consciousness and the deepest inner resource that is ever present. It is present in us in the space between the cells in our body. That resource, that space, which is tense with its vibrancy and its vitality and its intention to manifest unimaginable possibilities. Right? Chris and I have been having a little conversation about space as awareness itself. Space itself is alive. The space between you and me is alive. It is our making contact with each other that activates the vitality that is space itself. And in the activation of that vitality within space, there is an alignment that is a connection that is established. And that connection, if it is held, becomes an alignment. And for human beings, working together in alignment is the most exciting and satisfying experience that we can possibly have in this world. This is, after 50 years, I can say. And you can read it over and over again in the world. Those rare magical moments where a group of people come together in alignment and produce something as if the thing produced itself and we just all stood together and watched it. That's what happens. It's magical. Space itself is alive. The space between ourselves, in between ourselves, is where that vibrancy is of health is residing in us, and to go within ourselves and to activate all of our systems and to hold that activation till it becomes alignment is the vehicle through which health is expressed in our body. And because these bodies deteriorate, all of our bodies deteriorate, over time, the health, the physical vibrancy becomes refined enough that it rises up and becomes an emotional and intellectual vibrancy which continues to unfold itself as a profound spiritual understanding. So that at the moment when our body has finally used up its capacity to heal itself, our awareness is so grounded in our ultimate resource that we barely even notice. This is, of course, the ideal. We barely even notice that we have left this body behind. So, Shiva, or Maheshvara, in this case, he's using that word, is the protector because it is that resource which is constantly restoring our physical body, even as it balances our mind and emotion for the purpose of illuminating our true nature as space itself. Our true nature of space itself in the Tibetan system is called Rigpa. Wherever your Lakshmi resides, Lakshmi being space itself, so Lakshmi resides everywhere as the very essence of the cosmos itself. Wherever your Lakshmi resides, what other desire for enjoyment can there be? How true. When we are in the state of contact, alignment, and flow, the accomplishment of some endpoint pales to the joy in the experience of creating. In this case, it's not about a particular end, an arrival, and you've heard it, something similar to this before. The joy is in the journey. But it takes a certain capacity to release your ego to find the joy in the journey, because every journey has within it some failures. But Lakshmi in this sutra is intended to refer to unimaginable possibility that is abundant and gracious and kind and hospitable in every way. The notion in the common culture that Lakshmi means money is just completely superficial and trite, because Lakshmi is the consort of the divine, and in that sense is infinitely welcoming to every guest and every child and every needy, suffering person that comes in. Lakshmi is the ultimate in motherhood and the foundation of a household. I should say foundation of a household and motherhood. Whoever should obtain the all-pervading Lord just for a moment's happiness becomes filled with your bliss for all time, even from that very instant. And here, of course, he's speaking more about unimaginable possibility and the way even an instant connection, true connection with the unimaginable possibility is transformative in profound ways and awakens within us an experience of the light and the love of our own heart that changes us forever and becomes like a lighthouse for us, bringing us again and again and again and again into contact, alignment, and flow. That allows our hearts to open and allows that to be the whole dynamic to be experienced as devotion. This is what devotion is. Contact, alignment, and flow, and the bliss that is ever present in that simple yet absolutely profound state. And there is no dogma, there is no doctrine, there's no belief system that can encompass the profundity of this guy's work and his statements. This is not a belief system. This is an urging over and over and over again. It is an urging us to find our hearts and begin to live from our hearts in contact of our heart, and to find our bodies and to live in contact with our body, and to become aware of our mind and understand that it is the seed essence of suffering. The mind is the seed essence of suffering, so that we are continuously dissolving our mind into our hearts, finding contact, alignment, and flow, and living in peace. And the simple, simple bliss that is present in peace. There's some ecstasy in there too. But over time, it is the beauty of the simple peace that sustains us. The moon is a drop of the nectar of your bliss that has trickled down to earth, just as the sun is a mere particle of your brilliant light, O Lord. We dedicate ourselves to this, your third eye, the one symbol of your transcendental mystery. The transcendental mystery of unimaginable possibility. Who is much exalted beholding you has truly your realization. Who is struck suddenly with ineffable joy, he too has your realization. Having gotten into your heart, O Lord, those granted with your grace have withdrawn the exterior world from you and merged it within the interior. This is a little bit of confusing language to me, but I think what they're saying here is that what we are doing is taking the world, taking what is outside us in, and bringing what is inside us out, so that we can take what is outside us in again and let the inside come out. And what he is alluding here to in a subtle but beautiful way is that, well, first of all, he's alluding to the krama, which is a transmission that Utpaladeva and his gurus and his disciples and his descendants are established in. The krama is a very interesting and challenging topic that there's not a lot of literature created about, translated. Really, there's one poorly created 15th century manuscript called the Mahartha Manjari, which Patty helped translate out of Italian, that we have. But it is so sophisticated as to be almost impenetrable. But Utpaladeva here is referring to the krama, and he is talking about this process of bringing in energy and changing ourselves and exhaling that, our energy in the form of, structured through our sensory senses and our bodies. We're taking in and giving out. We are participating in respiratory process on every level of our existence. Both physically, we're breathing, inhaling and exhaling. We're bringing in the world into ourselves, and we are breathing out what is within us. As we sit here together in this room, I am breathing in your exhale. You are breathing in my exhale. We are even on the subtlest and simplest physical level, we are participating in one shared environment and slowly over time becoming the same. Amazing. But also equally true in terms of our intellectual capacity, our cognitive models slowly influence each other. We are behaving in from our cognitive model in response to the sensory experiences we're taking in, and we're acting out and taking in and acting out and taking in and acting out. And in the process of that, we are becoming refined, completely refined. And if we're paying attention, we become aware that we are nothing but respiratory process on every level. We're bringing the outside world into ourselves and merging it with the interior, and bringing the interior out and merging it in the exterior, and slowly from, with our practice of contact, alignment, and flow, we are more and more deeply experiencing and participating in the total unity of life itself. Everything else except you, O Lord, has two eyes, that is, even eyes. But you and the only Lord of the world are of the uneven eyes. And that's basically the third eye. He has Shiva has two eyes and a third eye right here. And the point of that is that it's that third eye, deeply cultivated intuition that allows us to see beyond the material form and to understand from beyond, the tensions of our worldly life and the struggles of our worldly life, the innate resource that we have arisen from and into which we subside. Just as fish are part of, let's say the fish are one of the highest demonstrations of the form of the life and the awareness of the ocean. We are the highest, the most complex demonstration of the life of the earth walking around on land. And, I told you last week, I think I'm reading this book about complexity. And the last part of it that I have had the time to read is that he was talking about the Gaia theory. Everybody know what the Gaia theory is? Gaia was basically written down by a Scottish scientist, biologist named Lovelock. I think it was James Lovelock. And because he had spent a lot of time at Findhorn, which is an island off the coast of Scotland that was one of the early uh, uh, vegetarian organic farming communities on the planet, Findhorn. Their spirituality was gardening. Well, Lovelock's part of, one of the things that the mainstream academics said is, he's a hippie guy who's just, making shit up. But Lovelock, even though he was, people were laughing at him completely, he came up with the Gaia theory, which was that the earth is, and everything on it is a single living organism that has its own consciousness, its own mind, and its own agendas. One consciousness, one agenda. And they were laughing at him for this until he made a computer model. And this was in the 70s. He and another guy worked out a computer model that demonstrated one of his fundamental principles. And as time has passed, they refined that model and refined that model and refined that model and made it more and more and more sophisticated. And in each iteration of this ever more complex model, their theory has been refined and more clearly articulated and over again proven until now, among biologists anyway, Gaia is mainstream dogma. Further, he's talking about, space, the human being's effort to engage in space exploration. And he's positing, he's not promising that this is true, but he's positing that our effort to engage in space exploration is based, in the universal imperative that seems to be that resonance becomes wave, and wave collapses into particles, and particles aggregate. Plasma fields or energetic fields have to become superimposed, and in their superimposition they give rise to waves which, when robbed of a certain amount of energy through the process of connection, collapse into particles. He's arguing that the whole point of human evolution is that it is a pathway for the earth to reach out and connect to, just as particles clump together, they aggregate together to give rise to form. We've come together not just to survive the relentless climate change that is the nature of the earth, but we have emerged as a pathway through which the earth can start to physically connect with other planets. And when other planets have been connected with, it is a pathway that the solar system can then begin to connect with other solar systems. And that the galaxy can begin to become a completely interconnected, integrated, being, which is then, and in space we see galaxies are out there reaching out and connecting to one another even as we speak. It's called the structure of the universe. So, the wonderful thing about Shaivism, one of the wonderful things that I really appreciate is these guys with, and I don't know what the level of their mathematical tools and skill sets were, But these guys, without measuring devices, simply with the practice of contact, alignment, and flow, a deep devotion to that practice, cultivated an insight into the nature of reality which has stood the test of time. 2,000 years later, literally trillions of dollars spent on research and instrumentation and more research, and et cetera and so forth. And everything they're telling us holds true. And so, we don't need to believe it. What he's really telling us to do is to forget about belief and engage in paying attention. And if you pay attention, and that's what science is really just simply paying attention and reporting honestly, what you have observed, and discussing that honest, report with other people who are similarly diligent in their scientific work, so that you can refine your insights and come to an understanding of what our essential predicament is. Not about belief. In fact, what we're doing, what science is doing, and what we are doing as spiritual people is constantly, destroying our belief as we refine our understanding and come completely into harmony with our ultimate resource, which is Shiva, the Lord of the uneven eyes, who sees through, with his third eye, sees through all of the levels of veils that shroud his presence as this entire universe. So much so, he goes on to say, without you, your opponents would not be able to speak ill of you, for even their disparaging remarks would not exist but through your majesty. In this sutra, he is referencing a whole long argument with Buddhism and with Vedanta that Shaivism is carrying on, and with I'm sure, with other traditions that we're not even aware of because they died out 1,000 years ago. But Buddhism is one of the things he's referring to here. Buddhist Sankhya's, Mimamsakas, etc. If, O Lord, there be in my heart a place for you that is free of inner and outer obstacles, what else would be needed? In that circumstance, breathing in and breathing out is bliss. The unfolding of that simple, good feeling which is forever resonant within us, that is not ours, but really is, the nature of the ultimate reality from which this body-mind complex has arisen. To reside in that without, inner obstacles, doubts, and inner obstacles are doubts and fears. Outer obstacles, well, what are you going to do? Some wander about from birth to birth, utterly restless souls. Others, Lord, move through the world joyously balanced. That's supposed to be us. Without having drunk the nectar of your devotion and without having beheld your essence, even then do people become perfected merely by hearing about you. Just the suggestion that joy is resonant inside us, and we have, each of us, the capacity to have that joy should we choose to, in time, is liberating completely. We are your servants, O Lord, and therefore we should receive the same care from you as you foster on the soul of the three worlds. I know what the three worlds mean, but I'm not sure what he's trying to say here. Except, come on, take care of us. Having seen you, the soul of the world, made of the nectar of the highest bliss. Having seen you, made of the nectar of the highest bliss, even now do I yet more intensely long for the ecstasy of your touch. The ecstasy of your touch. Contact, alignment, and flow. All misfortune suffered by those of the world becomes tolerable when joined with that form of yours known as constancy. With you existing as the essence of consciousness, omniscient and omnipotent, the manifestation of this world, appearing as false in every respect, is understood as your true form. While the manifestation of the world is false in every respect, it is still the form, the true form of consciousness itself. And my reference here again is the thing it brings up in my mind is the notion of Gaia. That there is a consciousness that is the consciousness of the earth itself. And the consciousness of the earth itself is resting in the consciousness that is space. And all of this, all of it is all of the earth and everything that happens on it, and the solar system and the galaxy and the space in between the galaxies. All of this is the form of the ultimate reality. And bravo. Enlivened by you, these senses quiver. Though they be like lumps of clay, right, without consciousness, what are our senses? Nothing. Nothing at all. Though they be like lumps of clay, they dance like feathery fluffs of cotton raised up by the breeze. Woof. Our senses dance. If, O Lord, the senses were now not endowed with self-consciousness, then who would forsake the realization that the world is only one with you? The senses were not endowed with self-consciousness. Self-consciousness. This is a challenging concept, but one that you guys can think about as you progress in your life. Space itself is self-aware. Space is aware of itself. And space is constantly adapting to, just like we are constantly adapting to all the different distributions of resources and challenges that internally we face. Space itself is experiencing, the same. And space itself is self-aware, and that self-awareness that is space itself that's our own self-awareness. There is only one self-awareness. There are many minds generating many thoughts and yada yada and concepts and yada yada yada. There is only one consciousness. They are to be praised, O Lord, who, while yet in the state of dissolution, have been purified by the touch of the fire of your wrath. Here he's saying, even hardship is to be welcomed. The state of dissolution is, broken down by, beat up by your life. And the touch of the wrath of your fire is the experience of tapasya, which, happens to each of us as we work within ourselves to dissolve tensions and remain in contact, alignment, and flow, no matter how our life manifests in front of us. Though you stand completely manifest with a body of splendorous light, why do I wander about, O Lord, in darkness? Now, there's a simple answer to that question, if you ever ask it of yourself, and that is because you are stuck in your head. Devotion is about opening your heart, opening your heart, opening your heart. It means you bring the energy of your mind through your attention onto and ever more deeply into your heart until it melts and opens and floods your senses with an experience of joy that it manifests purely from the inside of you and shows you that, your goal, the thing you are searching for in your life, is not in any of the objects or the circumstances that you are searching in. The goal of your life, the thing that you are searching for, is purely and completely within you and already and forever in your hand. You need only exercise it. And none of us would be here together in this moment sharing this experience if you hadn't already had that experience to some degree. It is that we have had that experience of sublime joy from within ourselves that compels us, even if we don't know what's compelling us, even if we have no thought of it, we're just drawn. It compels us to come back again and again and again to the understanding that there's got to be more to life than a job and a new car and a bunch of money and a house and whatever else you want to put in it. There's got to be more to it than that. And when we think about that, we end up in our own hearts permeated with bliss. Each and every moment of our life, on each and every breath, the bliss of the ultimate reality is present within us and available should we remember to turn our attention to it. You, the invisible Lord, are my immortal form. Yet still, I am only an abode of mortal characteristic, whose speech is adorned with the name Maheshvara, and whose forehead bears the mark of salutation, is indeed alone the exalted one, whose speech is adorned with the name Maheshvara, and whose forehead bears the mark of salutation, is indeed alone the exalted one. The mark of salutation is 3 vertical lines across your forehead that are made in some kind of ash. Now, the ash could be the ash of a haban, or, and that's sort of one of the simplest forms, or it could be the ash of incense, or the most intense form of it is the ash of a dead body. In these traditions, the earliest of the traditions, like the Pashupatis, the Lingayas, the Karpalikas, and then later the Agoris, the Natha-Goris, and the random Agoris, all wear this mark of salutation. And, Shiva and all of his disciples are most confidently discovered on earth in the cremation ground. And in the cremation ground, Shiva and his disciples are wearing the ash of dead bodies. It is considered in these traditions that any human being lives in a cremation ground, lives in a graveyard, because in a graveyard there are bones and rot and pus and blood and tissue, and it turns out that's what we are, walking around on 2 legs wherever it is we go. For these people, in fact, the whole earth is nothing but a cemetery. And all of us are just the sloughed off, dead skin cells from the body of the living consciousness of Shiva. Since you are indeed the real and the unreal, why then do I not realize you without any effort spontaneously? The interesting thing about the transmission of the krama, which underlies Utpaladeva's work, more than, say, Sri Vidya or any of the other. This is a krama text. The Pratyabhijna Hridayam is a krama text. That's the text that we went earlier. And in fact, Shemaraj is writing the Pratyabhijna Hridayam in contrast to his guru Abhinavagupta, because the Tantra Loka of Abhinavagupta, this is a massive and brilliant work, encyclopedic, 36 volumes. But for the Tantra Loka, Abhinavagupta has chosen to use a Trika text as his foundation, the Malini Vijayottara. And so, and there are all kinds of problems with it, and nobody's quite sure why Abhinavagupta, who does this encyclopedic and basically brilliant work, chose the Malini Vijayottara as a text, because it's highly problematic. But he did. So Shemaraj comes along and writes the Pratyabhijna Hridayam to remind us all that in fact the whole tradition is founded in the krama, not the trika. And the essence of the krama is the worship of 12 kalis. Doesn't matter that you know their names, it's not important, because each of the 12 kalis represents a part of the cycle of respiratory process of the senses, not of the body, of the senses, where our innermost vibrancy arises and reaches out to the world through our senses to connect with the objects in the field. In fact, galvanizing the vibrancy of space to establish itself as connection. And then it, having connected with its objects, it retreats again. It brings that frequency, it brings that energy, it brings that information back inside us in 6 steps. It's 6 steps out, the 6 collies out, and the 6 collies in. The respiratory process of the senses is the process by which Shiva is constantly observing himself and his and all that is enlivened by his life, and becoming ever more deeply informed by this experience as he unfolds. Cool, no? We're all participating in respiratory process, which is in fact much bigger than all of us. The respiratory process that's happening for me, I'm breathing. The entire universe is breathing on every scale. And we have no capacity to even imagine how many scales there are and how vast it all is. And so we, like Shiva, can only rest in the experience of respiratory process and accept the limitations of our intellectual and cognitive capacity, until it is refined and refined and refined and refined, to an extent that we are way beyond physical cognition and emotional limitation. Each of us. And this, for each of us, really what we are doing is dissolving our boundaries and establishing ourselves in an awareness of the one respiratory process, which is the subtlest of all of these resonances and feedback loops, and living in the awareness that there is no other, which is a profoundly peaceful, beautiful awareness. Shiva is the real, which is unseen, and the unreal, which is seen. Got it? What we see is the unreal. The real is the unseen, seen with the third eye of Shiva, with our intuitive eye. For a servant of Shiva who has identified himself with Shiva, what happiness is there that cannot be attained? Therefore, even the heads of the gods serve me the wine of immortality. In this, he's criticizing, the sort of the royal court theology and theism. He's saying ordinary religion, the religion of the royal courts and the ordinary world. In this case, we would throw in Christianity and Judaism and Islam. All religion exists as servants to those people who see beyond religion into, the domain which is pure attention, pure awareness, and beyond the whole obstacle of belief. And to that end, I would just like to remind you that 99 99.9% of everything human beings have ever believed has proven to be false. 99.9% of everything we have ever believed is bullshit. Isn't it? Yeah. And so while we navigate this world, and everybody has to navigate it, it's okay, we have to remember that what we believe about it is an obstacle, and what we are seeing is unreal. So that as we navigate this world, establishing ourselves in bliss and manifesting contact, alignment, and flow, we are cultivating our ability to see through to the deeper reality, the unseen real, and abide in that unseen real in contact and alignment. And that contact and alignment manifests itself as flow. The one thing I do believe in about myself and the world I live in is it's flowing. I believe that. I have no other idea. And honestly, I don't think we have the capacity to know. I had a brief little discussion with a very old friend of mine from Bloomington, Indiana, named David Eastman the other day on social media. And he had posted a quote about meaningful life, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I said, I don't think it's true. And he asked me to elaborate, and I said, the meaning of life for us individuals is an ego-based fiction. For all of us, always. It's ego-based fiction. I do believe there is cosmic meaning to life, but it's not accessible by us. And so that leaves us in a little bit of an awkward position, doesn't it? Oops. If we can't know, then we simply have to reside in contact, alignment, and flow, and learn to trust. And of course, living in contact, alignment, and flow, and learning to trust in the world of human beings is difficult. And so Shaiva sadhus and also other traditional, people following other paths withdraw from the world to live away from it in contact, alignment, and flow that can be undisturbed without stresses that are constantly undermining their capacity to trust. Even the gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Indra, Vayu, etc., even the gods are serving wine, the wine of immortality, to the devotees of Shiva. That's a charming little imagining. Brahma, Vishnu, Indra, etc., walking around in the banquet hall pouring wine for the devotees of Shiva. At least I find that funny. And here, of course, the illusion is the wine is that simple good feeling. When we drink a little wine, our hearts get warm and a little softer sometimes. when we drink the nectar of our own deepest inner resource, we become inebriated, intoxicated with bliss. That's what this means. Between the heart and the navel of living beings, in the form of the great digestive fire, you devour all that moves in and moves out. First of all, the allusion here is to the havan that we do on Friday nights, the fire. The second thing is that he's equating the fire of the havan with the digestive fire of our own metabolic processes, and suggesting that there is a correspondence between making offerings into the fire and making oblations, offerings into our own metabolic fire, which happen in the form of food and in the form of the ghee of sensory experience. And the most important fire, whenever we're sitting in the havan, like for me, the important thing is I am activating my own inner fire and merging it in the outer fire, and extending that mergence through the field of through our shared field in that moment. Shiva's creative process that is consuming and reconsuming, consuming, expressing, consuming, expressing, in the same way that, we cut vegetables, we eat part of it, we throw some of it back onto the compost pile, but then we poop out the rest and throw that on the compost pile too. So all of it, everything is compost, and everything that we are devouring, everything that there is compost for yet a new emergence in the cycle of the 12 kalis of the krama and the process of respiration. Our metabolic process is the havan. And this is also true in the chud practice. In chud practice is a ritual practice. Some of you know what it is. I don't know if you know, Kelly, but some of you know. Chud is a ritual practice. Was transmitted to Tibet by Padma Sanjay, who in fact was most likely a Karpalika, a Shaiva sadhu. It's interesting that Milarepa over here is carrying a skull cup. What does that tell us about him? He's a Karpalika. He's Buddhist. The Buddhists have thoroughly identified with him, but secretly he's a Karpalika. And, this process of chud is a process of releasing your ego clinging, cutting up your body, offering your physical body to the world, and offering your innermost joy to all the gurus and deities, to all the ascended beings, and dissolving yourself in giving away your ego and anything you can say as I or mine or me or you or any of that, and just becoming completely the cosmic fire that is metabolic process on, and then beyond metabolic process is respiratory process that is the awareness and the vibrancy and the vitality of the life of the universe. You devour all that moves and moves not. So true. So, we have finished the 10th. And I know that's kind of a long one. Any questions? I think Utpaladeva was very clear in the earliest of the poems that he's saying, stop all discursive thinking now. Because the mind is the seed essence of suffering. We're tangled up in the world, and we get tangled up in this thing and that thing and, the whole business. We get tangled up in good and evil and right and wrong and this way of doing things and that way of doing things. And we're struggling. I mean, in that whole process of getting tangled up in discursive thinking about what might make us, what our problems are and what might make us feel better, is the pathway to hell. And so we have to rise up to the level where we are capable of holding an understanding of the cycle of the 12 kalis, the respiratory process that is cosmic, and holding that awareness, we take in and give out and take in and give out until our entanglement in our ego is dissolved. A new way to think about respiratory process. Okay, so that the three eyes of Shiva are the inner world, the outer world, and the transcendent world, the world that holds both the inner and the outer world. Space itself holds the inner world and the outer world. It holds all form and all possibility. So, really, I mean, yes, we're breathing in and out and we're taking in and taking out, but but we have the capacity to rise up to within ourselves a vision, an understanding that this breathing in and breathing out is, not, I mean, yes, we're breathing in and breathing out, but it is a process that is happening within the entire field. And ultimately, there is no in and out. There's only, you don't have interior and exterior. You have transcendence in which the in and the out they are expressions of the resonance of the whole field. And so, and here you have, like in this room or on the planet Earth, you have individual fields which are in a state of superimposition. In a state of superimposition, influencing each other, and the whole field in the form of the subtle, unique resonance of each of the individual waves within that field. But really, it's a whole field that is happening. And it's a whole field happening on who knows how many scales. I mean, we talk about the three worlds, but there are scales and scales and scales and scales, meaning, size within size within size, piece within a piece within a piece. As Mandelbrot's fractals demonstrate. You can look at when you start to look at measuring a boundary, you look at the boundary of any system and you start to try to measure the boundary of the system. The more carefully you look at the boundary of the system, the longer the boundary grows into infinity. So we don't think of in and out. Gretch, of taking in and giving out. That's happening, yes, on a physical level, but that's the unreal. The real is this resonance that each of us holds and that we're constantly shifting and changing as we move through a variety of fields in which we are superimposed or connected with. And in the process of that, the more we are in contact, alignment, and flow, the more the cosmic dimension of the process is accessible to our awareness.
The 12 collies are a reference to the
I think they certainly are. I think the 12 collies are a reference to, they are grounded in, because this was the language and the tools that these people had. The 12 collies are grounded in 12 constellations. But, you know, there's so many constellations. But the 12 that became, you know, the most important for the ancient Indian priests and their traditions probably are the 12 collies, and that sets them in a, you know, you have the breath cycle of the body, prana kundalini, which is 12 times a minute, 12. The 12 collies. A complete cycle of chitta kundalini is 12. And there's a, I forget the unit, the measure of time that is made up of 12 cycles of the mind. But anyway, go, and then the cycle, the respiratory process of the earth in relationship to the sun is the 12 months of the year. So yes, I do think so. Well, first of all, you're talking about a guy who's one of the best educated guys in the whole world at that point in time. And he's also living in the richest place in South Asia at its richest moment. So I think what he's really referring to is the competition for patronage going on in the royal court between the various traditions that are you know, in ceaseless debate, you know, about the correctness of their own view, or what is the correct view. And in achieving this, you know, what they end up doing is, and this is true of all human beings, we end up listening to argue that we're right rather than listening to learn something and modify our perspective. And so you've got these traditions which, you know, become dependent on royal patronage, and then they're constantly arguing among themselves about what their own, you know, about the correctness of their own view. Now, one of the extraordinary things about this work and about Utpaladeva and his predecessors from about 100 years earlier, Vasgupta is really, well, Vasgupta's writing 150 years earlier, is that they stopped trying to justify their own perspective, and they started listening to everybody and thinking about what the flaws in all the arguments were and what their experience actually was. And it is out of this listening that, you know, pratyabhijna philosophy emerges. And then, amazingly, pratyabhijna philosophy emerges and then is cast off by the very people who put it in play in order to tell us that discursive thinking and any kind of knowledge is actually not where it's at. Where it's really at is in devotion. How extraordinary. But the fact that these guys could say that and argue it very learnedly, you know, was what made them, you know, by far the most influential tradition in South Asia by, the end of the 10th century. Yeah. I'm sure he was very aware of it. I'm sure he was very aware of what was going on all over the area, because strangely, even though we think we don't really get how these communities were interconnected in India, the the Pratyabhajan tradition is being widely, you know, dispersed throughout the whole of the subcontinent by the 10, within 50 years, it's everywhere. And so I'm sure that he was aware of village religion and village practices as well as the highest practices. And the supreme deity within the Krama tradition, which is Kala Shankarshini or Siddhi Lakshmi, the supreme deity, Kala Shankarshini. So Sanderson talked to us about, remember, gave a talk about and showed pictures of images of Kala Shankarshini that had turned up that they'd been discovered in Kashmir from various periods. I mean, outside of Kashmir from various periods. And he is able to demonstrate that these teachings are present and active and being referenced on a village level, throughout the whole of North India by, well, the earliest bronzes that we see have got to be like 6th century bronzes. The earliest Kala Shankarshini bronze is 6th century maybe, but all the way up until the 14th century. So these traditions are being widely referenced throughout the whole of India. And one of the reasons why these guys like Abhinavagupta, 100 years later, writes the Tantra Loka is because it's so widespread and unique in all of the locations. In each location, the system has been around long enough that it has developed its own uniqueness. And Abhinavagupta has to come back and talk about it all over again, in order to point out to everybody that all of these unique, practices that are going on all over the place are unified in the form of 4 transmissions, which are grounded in, the one reality that is consciousness itself. So, and this is going on and vibrant and active in the North India till the Muslims come along and make a big effort to suppress it. They're active in South India until the 15th century, when the kings and the rich people of the elites of South India shift their resources to creating a much more organized and acceptable form of religion to defend themselves against incursions. They were basically creating a religious justification for fighting the Muslims, who were bringing a religious justification to trying to kill them and steal their shit. And so, that was Islam in its early days. Islam emerged as the replacement to the empire of the Romans and the Persians. But it had exactly the same business model, which is kill people and steal their shit. So, in response to the Muslim threat in South India, the South Indian elite, shifted their focus from paying attention to personal liberation to creating an organized religion, which would justify, them defending their land. And that's when it started to go into decline. From the 15th century onwards, this system is in decline. So, and it's in decline because patronage was less as they spent more on the military. And rules needed to be, more rules were necessary because, the military requires organization, and people require rules to keep them from running away when they're faced with some battle. Okay, is that good?